Okay guys, so we drew one horse that was very basic, and I said we were going to draw another one making a pose, so that is what we're going to do now, is our horse making a cool pose. There we go, that's the one we want. Let's see if I can get this where we can see it. There we go, and we'll move this under here. Alright, so first let's look at our rib cage, our hip bone. Now this is a very stylized horse because this mane is going crazy in this tail. I love it. Look how flowy it is. Beautiful. So we'll have to think about that when we go to draw the details. But first, since this horse is not flat on the ground, its body's not horizontal, its body is at a diagonal, its oval for its rib cage is also going to be at a diagonal. So let's draw a diagonal oval here very gently. Remember, we're just sketching this part. And then the diagonal hip bone there. Now when we did our first horse, we did this step and we drew all the body first, and then when we got to the head we roughed in the circle. You can rough in the circle head when you're making the pose, because that will kind of help you feel out the distance of the horse's body. So I'm saying the circle of the head, its muscle for its cheek, is kind of about here, and that triangle for its head is about there, maybe a little more down. So the good thing about sketching is you can just draw on top of what you sketch until you get it how you like it. Okay, so this is the kind of the basic under sketch of what that horse is going to be, and if you showed it to someone just like this, they would have no idea what you were about to draw, right? It doesn't look like anything. But the artist's imagination can really help you use these basic shapes before you start putting lines down really hard and then mess up. You know, your proportions can be messed up very easily, and if you just start going for it without making this plan, you might end up with something you don't like as much. Alright, so let's outline the body of my horse here, the hip bone, come down, the back. Okay. Now on this guy we can clearly see the angle of his back legs and how they bend backwards. So let's put that big muscle that curves down. Muscle. It's going to curve down there. Alright, then we're going to have it come down to where the knee is. And it's at this angle because, again, his knee is bent. Alright, so then let's make the bend back to the hoof. And the hoof at the bottom. Come down, back up. And we'll finish up the hoof with our diagonal line there. Now this is kind of hidden a little bit by its tail, but you can see the other side of the leg here. So it goes up and then bends back and makes this very almost an angle, almost a V, sideways V there, of its knee bending backwards. So we have kind of this zigzag. So let's go up to the knee I put the bump there for its ankle. Alright, and then we'll make that zigzag we talked about. Zig, zag. Okay, now its rib cage and belly on this horse, its belly's kind of sucked in, so we end up with this curve like we have on the back, a curve in between the belly and the rib cage. Now, because of the way the horse is jumping, we see the big muscle on this leg also, which is pretty interesting. Mostly we were talking about the big muscle on the back. The front leg also has this big muscle, but usually it's less easy to see. You see it more when they're bunching up their leg. So I'm gonna make sure I have that line for that big muscle. So let's put a line right here. Alright, and then the legs are look just like a finger. So we got line, line, line. 1, 2, 3. So 2, 3. So let's make that upper part of the leg. And it kind of gets skinnier towards that knobbly knee. So it starts sort of wide and gets kind of skinny. Okay, then this part comes down. And this gives us the knob knee, so we put kind of a little bump there and then go down. And then we've got to get the hoof, so we're going to go back, down, in. And then we'll put a bump here and finish the hoof. Okay, so let's do the second part of this big muscle. It's kind of a curve here going into the chest of the horse. Alright, and I want to make the curve of the horse's neck coming up to that head I roughed in. And on this side, alright, and then let's trace around that curve of the jaw muscle. And then we'll go down. Curve around for the mouth and the nose. And then back up. Now this horse's ears are forward. I'm gonna put eye here. Nose. And mouth. Now the picture, this one has its mouth open. For simplicity, I didn't do that because it's kind of hard to draw mouse open. If you want to try it out, go ahead. Okay, so now we need the background details and then the mane and the tail that we were talking about. So first, I'm going to put a second ear because that's easy. Another one. Now its legs, the back leg, or the leg behind this leg, is hidden partially. So we only see the start of it here. And then the rest of it here, down here. So I'm going to color that in lightly to show that it's in the background, it's in shadow. And then for his back leg, we will just kind of copy this line since the tail's going to be hiding some of it. So copying this and coloring it in. Okay, let's have fun with the mane and the tail on this guy. So they have made it like the wind is blowing and this horse's hair is luxurious, like he's conditioning or something. It's beautiful. And so we're going to start on the crown of his head, the top of his head, and just make a kind of curved line that whips backward, however you like. Don't go crazy and scribble it. We just want some loose curves. Okay? And so we'll move forward a little bit and do that again. It can be bigger, it can be smaller, whatever you think fits. Now let's make one that kind of overlaps those two. So this new one I made has crossed over the other two. It's getting in their space. The mane is going to keep doing this all the way down to the bottom of his neck. So let's make another. Now you can have some that come into where his body is too. His hair can overlap his body. Okay, so now let's make this kind of look like cohesive hair. Right now it just looks like some random strands going crazy. And so I'm gonna go in between two groups of hair, and I'm gonna make some curved lines that just kind of match up to the other hairs. Try to make your curves sort of match each other and overlap each other. Alright, let's go crazy with the tail. I'm gonna make a tail come out first. And then we're gonna do sort of what we do with the hair, a big poof. Curves back. However you want it. And then on the other side, you don't want to see the legs through the hair. That is something that you can erase if you didn't draw too hard. And let's put some curvy lines. Remember to try and make it match the parts you've already drawn, some of the curves, so that they kind of fit together. Since we've got a few minutes here, I want to talk about shading our horse, or horses, to kind of show those muzzle groups we were talking about. So we can see it on this guy, and I think that's pretty good. You can even see it on the first one we did in the other video. They're shading to show where the muscles of the horse are. So if we're looking at most things, light's usually from somewhere above, because sun or light bulbs or whatever is above us. And so we can usually imagine shadows underneath things. Okay? That's just kind of some rules of thumb. Not always. There's going to be exceptions you need to be looking out for, but most of the time shadows are going to be on the bottom of things, bottom edges. So when we look at this horse, we see the bottom of his rib cage has been shaded in. It's darker. So I'm going to go ahead and try that out. I'm going to color in the bottom of the rib cage of this horse. Oh, and of course at any point if you want to get rid of your guidelines so it looks more realistic, you can do that. You don't have to if you like them, but you can. Okay, so I've been shading in. Notice that when I shade, I don't color hard all at once. Again, I draw very soft, very, very light, and I make the shadows slowly change. So there's no shadow, there's a little tiny bit of shadow where I just barely colored, there's a little more shadow, until it gets quite dark. So now if the bottom of his chest is shady, then the bottom edges of the legs are going to have shadows, and the bottom edges of the big muscles are going to have shadows. So let's try. On this leg, the bottom edge of it is going to be a little darker. So when I'm imagining light coming down from the sun, hitting this horse, it's going and touching everything on top, and these bottom edges are a little darker. Something else that might happen, you see when the light's hitting the top of my horse here, the head is going to shade the neck some, so I can add some shadow there, even though the neck is not necessarily on the bottom. When light cannot pass through something, it makes a cast shadow. So the head of the horse is casting a shadow on its neck. Right? On these nice thick muscles, we can see that the bottom of it is going to have a shadow. Now, I'm also making my shadows curved because horse is 3D, right? Its muscles are rounded. And so whenever I make these shadows, I'm trying to curve my lines to show that the horse is round, a 3D object that you could sit on and ride. Okay, there we have our beautiful rearing horse with shading this time. Bye guys.